Apologies, my network is terrible. I am so sorry. My network is terrible. Sorry about that.
Hello?
Hello, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Hmm. Yes, sorry about that. My network went off. It's
I'm
raining.
very sorry. Network here
It's
is terrible too.
it's okay. So where were we? You were talking about what were you talking about again?
I can't remember. I think you asked a question about why I engage in surrealism and all that.
Yes, yes,
It was
and the
inspired.
what stood
Why
out
I
to
was
you with the
inspired by
artist that
surrealist
you
painters. Yes,
yes,
yes, yes.
so you were saying.
Yeah, and I said something about, you know, my major attraction with them was their desire to be able to make
Okay,
sense
yes,
of the fullness of reality,
of
to
the
explore the
reality.
world of dreams, the world of the imagination, the unseen world, the world of, unexplored.
Hello. Ah, Hasbunallah.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Am I back? I'm sorry, the network
It's
is acting
okay.
up.
We're
The,
all
the next,
facing the same problem.
I think the ghost of surrealist masters is trying to conspire against us.
No, it should come to help us, please. We're trying to revive this artifact to life because
I
after
think
this,
we have
I
to
think I'm going
appease
to
to the
try.
ghost of Antipator and the charm. We must appease to their
Exactly.
ghost.
I think after this, I'm going to find a hypnotic tea and get into hypnosis and start trying surrealist forms because I have
Yes, yes.
to. Their ghosts are supposed to be helping us, not trying to do a research. So, language.
Mm.
Let me come to language. Do you have
Okay.
a flair and interest in language? First, before that, are you fluent in French? If I, if I may ask.
I'm not fluent in French. I know a little bit of Italian because
Mm.
yes, by chance I had to live in Italy
Okay.
for some period of time, over a year. So I know how to speak bucket Italian. Grazie, prego, arrivederci. I know how to get by in the market. Yes. So, but I'm not
Okay.
fluent in French. It's a language that I find very romantic, very attractive. It's a language I would like to learn.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if I got my research wrong, but were the foreign words you used in your book, were they French or Italian?
I think most of them were French because uh, the Surrealist movement, more or less, just were in France. And the Breton is French.
Yeah.
French and all that. And there's this poem, of course, that I titled The False Mirror, La Fox Miroir, so I use a lot of French words, not because I understand French, but because I wanted to just create um, and evoke the sense of place and time.
The 20th century. Okay, so
Yeah.
you mentioned earlier you also write poems on the Sufi perspective, and
Yes.
you, you have a lot of interest in Arabic poets. So is language something of general interest to you? Is it a form of art, a form of portraying art to you, or is it just something of interest that you like or you would like to learn?
I love language because what I feel, what I try to aim at in my poetry, there's what I call um, essential poetry. Before I put pen to paper, I try to write my poems in what I call essential poetry. Now, this essential poetry cannot be written down on a paper, and it's beyond language because I absolutely believe in what Jorge Luis Borges said. Jorge Luis Borges is one great writer, great thinker I admire. I have deep respect for him. In fact, he sits at the center of the literary pantheon I have in my head. I have a literary pantheon, um, like a realm of literary immortals in my head. And Jorge Luis Borges sits at the center of that pantheon. And there's something he said. He said language is unnatural to the human species. That what is natural to us is feeling. Language is very, very unnatural to us. We invented language as a necessity. Now, when I write, I try to go back to that time beyond language. Beyond language, I try to evoke feeling. I try to evoke feeling. So I respect language. But I feel that poetry goes beyond language. It goes to that initial essence of what makes us human, which is the idea of feeling. That's where poetry comes from.
I think this
Yes.
is going to be my major takeaway uh, from this book.
Wow, and
Beyond
I'm glad.
beyond
Wow.
language, because
Yeah.
it is very, very profound. I don't think I've ever had anything as profound as this in a long while. Going
Wow.
beyond language to a time where it's just feeling, and
Wow.
well, it sounds frustrating because I can't imagine feeling something and not being able to express it. How do you express it when you go beyond
Ah, I don't know how to put it, but I feel that 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 sense of feeling, that feeling is about intense emotion, is about the emotion of love, which is, I believe poetry comes from love. Poetry comes from wonder. Poetry comes from the sense of bewilderment. Poetry comes from, you know, that sense of nothingness which exists before language, before anything.
I'm going to read.
That is where the origin, there's this idea that I think Ben Okri also believes that, poetry is related to the words that was uttered before the beginning of creation, which most mystics believe. I feel that idea of poetry, which goes beyond language, which is about nothingness, about love, about bewilderment, about magic, about enchantment. That is the idea of the original word that was uttered before the beginning of creation. That is what we find in the great epics. That is what we find in Gilgamesh, in the Epic of Gilgamesh. uh, you know, that is what we find in the Quran. The first word that was uttered in the Quran was read. Read. Ikra. I feel this is related to poetry. In fact,
I think
um, in some way, God is a poet,
the best poet, the most
the best poet.
eloquent poet.
Yes, the
Mm.
best poet. If you look at it in the pre-Islamic tradition, they there was no revealed book. There was no book. The Arabs did not have book before the coming of Islam, before the Quran, and the Arabs interacted with the gods through the poet, which is why we had the mu'allaqat, which were hung on the
Yeah.
Kaaba, which is why poets like Al-Mutanabbi, poets like, not Al-Mutanabbi, sorry, poets like Antara, poets like Imrul Qais were elevated to the status of prophets because they commune and communicated with the gods. The Arabs respected, the pre-Islamic Arabs respected poets, they respected language, they respect the ability of the poet to commune with the higher power, which is higher than himself.
I feel like you just knocked me with a piece of information that is out of this world, literally out of this world. I'm going to need some. I just wrote down some phrases, especially the one about feeling before language. I'm going to need that written in calligraphy, and I'll hang it on my wall because I want to read it every morning. It is very profound, very profound.
Wow.
Thank you so much for this. So, you mentioned earlier that you don't like to identify as a controversial poet, and I think after the few questions you've answered, I understand that it is not the controversy you enjoy, but you are just dabbling in the art. You're learning the art and you're loving what you're learning about the art of poetry, and you're enlightening us and bringing it to light that this poetry is not just about love and happy things. There's something much more in depth to it. And I think you've answered that question. You've cleared it. So, back to your book. Do you have a favorite poem in this book?
Unfortunately, it is difficult to say. There are poems that I love here. I love the Baudi quatrains of Abu Nuwas. I love Abu Nuwas. I love the body or metaphysical investigation of desire, which was inspired by Sabuke. I love Andalusian blues, and I love I Can't Be Present. So I don't know. I don't have a favorite poem here. I
Okay,
don't
I
know.
think Abdulbas just said that's also his favorite poem, the last one you mentioned. So, if my question now, if you could meet any artist, one single poet, just one, if you could meet him and have a lengthy conversation with him or her, who would it be and why?
There's only one poet. I want you to guess one. Have you read The Poet of Dust?
No, unfortunately.
God, you have to read The Poet of Dust. We should not have had this
I have
discussion
to know.
without you
You
reading
know
The
what?
Poet of Dust.
This is the first time I read. This is the first time I read a collection of your poems, and believe me, after this, there is no poem you're going to release that is going to pass by me. Inshallah, there isn't.
Now, I have to send
Even
you
if
a
I don't
copy
understand the poem, I'll still look for it and I'll still read it.
Now I have to send you a copy of The Poet of Dust. I think I'll send it in the mail tomorrow. I'll send it.
No
It's a
problem.
promise.
So I think you.
Now,
Ah,
the poet I consider my patron saint is Adonis Ali Ahmad Said. That is his name. That's his name. He's a Syrian poet. He he has been nominated for the Nobel Prize a countless number of times. Every year I wake up when they are going to announce the poet of the Nobel Prize, winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature, and I will say
yes,
from I can't know I cannot remember from time immemorial from
yes.
2010 I always say from 2006 I will always say this is the year of Adonis. Until today, he has not
Wow.
won. So I think about 2, 3 years ago, I concluded that Adonis is greater than the Nobel Prize. He's never going to win. He's greater than the Nobel Prize. He is elevated to the status of a poet god. He's like Imrul Qais, you know. So this
You know,
is
just watching your body language as you're talking about it gives it all away that
so
that you would
Adonis is
love
like
to
is
see.
the greatest poet alive. There's no poet like him. Adonis, Ali Ahmed Said. There's this poem that I've always wanted to write, and the title is Anna Adonis. I am Adonis. I've not been able to write it. I This idea came to me like 5 years ago. I said I will write this poem about Adonis. Anna Adonis. I am Adonis. I've not been able to write it, but I'm sure I'll write
Please
it one
be
day.
able to. Please be able to. I can only imagine how that song is going to turn out. Seeing your body expression and how
Yes,
it's like a song that
Adonis.
it's like
Adonis is the wizard of metaphor. Like when I read Adonis, I got poetry, and I've been reading Adonis. I read his poems here and there on the internet and all that. Then one day I was doing a program, a military program in South Africa. I was in Muizenberg. So there's this a good bookstore in I can't remember the town. I can't remember the Kalk Bay. Kalk Bay.
okay.
That's the name of the town. So they have this very
You see, the ghost of network is against us today.
hello.
Yes, I can hear you now.
I'm very sorry for the network.
No problem. Don't worry.
I'm in
So
Port
you were
Harcourt
talking
and the
about
network is erratic.
it's
Adonis.
okay, we can manage. Yes, you were talking about the
Yes,
man being in South Africa and coming upon a
yes,
bookstore.
yes. I was in Muizenberg, and the Kalk Bay books was in Kalk Bay. It was just a town a few miles away from from Simonstown. So they called me from the bookstore and said, we have your book, blah blah blah. You know, I ordered for the collected poems of Adonis, and I have the book is somewhere around. This is it.
Of course, it
Can you
should be
see
close
it?
to you. Yes.
Yes, this is the collected poems of Adonis. You know, yeah, it was translated by Khalid Matawa. So,
Mhm.
um, I also ordered for the works of Jose Saramago. So they called me. They said, "We have your books. Can you come and collect them?" I said, "Yes, I will." And something strange happened. I went to the train station. I missed my train, but I could not imagine coming back to my school without those books. You know what I did? Something crazy. I walked, I ran to the next train station so that I will catch the next train. When I got to the next train station after about 1 hour, 30 minutes, I didn't get the train that will take me to Kalk Bay. And there was still another train station that will lead me to Kalk Bay. I still ran. I said, okay, let me try to meet up with the next train. In short, I ran, walked for about 3 hours to be able to get to Kalk Bay. I got to Kalk Bay Books, and I think the person managing the bookstore was like, wow, Umar. She called me Umar, a female. She said, if everyone loved books the way you do, then this world is going to be a beautiful place. Look
A
at the kind of
very
books you
beautiful
are
one.
ordering for. Because I ordered for the collected poems of Adonis, some books by Jose Saramago, which they got, but they did not get the Gospel According to Jesus Christ, which was written by Jose Saramago. They said they were going to get it later from Amazon, blah, blah, blah. You know, I later got the book, but I just could not leave that place without the collected poems of Adonis. When I got back, I engaged with Adonis and all that. And that was when I wrote The Peninsula of Poets. And a lot of the poems that were in The Poet of Dust, Adonis gave me confidence. It gave me courage, not confidence, courage. You know, I felt I could talk about anything and not be afraid. It made me to conquer fear. And Adonis, of course, engaged with Al-Mutanabi and Nefari and all the great Arabic poets of the Abbasid era. And I went back to them. I tried to get their works. I engaged with them. So for me, my patron saint in poetry remains Adonis. I am very much interested in metaphysics, and Adonis was a poet who was concerned with the metaphysics of being.
This this is the greatest love story ever. You
Wow.
cannot tell me otherwise. Damn Romeo and Juliet, damn Layla and Majnun. This is the greatest love story to have ever lived and that will ever live for all time to come. Wow.
Wow.
I think me and the listeners here, I think we are going to create a group and we're going to find a way to bring Adonis to you or teach you to Adonis. No matter what, if we're going to bring heaven and earth together, we'll do it because you're giving us masterpieces back to back.
Wow.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
so your title, yeah, as I don't want to use unconventional anymore because you changed my perception towards your poetry. So your titles are as interesting as your poems. How do you come about them? I noticed some were um, derived from the paintings the or the artists themselves, but the other ones, how do you come up with them?
Well, to a great extent, I love titles. I love titles, and I'm very, very poor at um, getting titles for my books. I wasn't the one who coined the word "the poet of dust" for my first collection. When I finished writing that book, I think there was a chapbook that was published. It was called "The Poet of Sand." That was apt. Then when I finished I wrote other poems. Then we have to bring out this collection at, as a full collection. So when I finished writing the poems, I sent them to my friend, my literary friend, who calls me his cousin, Richard Ali. He looked at everything and he said, and I told him, this is my suggestion, the poetry of sand, the poetry of dust. You know, he now said, no, this is the poet of dust. I was like, wow, excellent, apt, the poet of dust. That captured it because the chapbook was the poet of dust, and he now felt
Yes,
the poet of sand, and he now felt the whole book should be like the poet of dust,
sort of
and
that.
it made a lot of sense. Now, for this second collection, like Butterflies Scattered About by Art Rascals, I did not talk to Richard. When I finished writing that book, I went through the poems, and I don't have a favorite poem, but there is this poem that I felt, if I am asked, which poem is your magnum opus, I will call that poem my magnum opus, and that's Optical Illusions in the House of Paul Eluard. Paul Eluard is a leading member of the Surrealist movement, you know, and I published that poem on brittle paper. Many people liked it, particularly Husseini. Husseini loved it so much, you know. And there's this line, like papilios, butterflies, scattered about by Art Rascals. You know, I carried that line and said, no, this line encompasses and encapsulates the essence of everything I am trying to say in this book. This should be the title of my poem. It's almost like a mini poem, almost like a haiku, like butterflies scattered about by Art Rascals. But, and I think I have no regret choosing it.
I think it's a really beautiful title. It's like sprinkling poetic dust all over us, the readers, and it's really good. It captures the book, and it's very intriguing, by the way. So, how do you feel about today's poetry?
How do I feel about what?
About today's type of poetry? You know, the mainstream poetry now is the main type of poetry that Nigerian poets write is just love, and a few of us write about the nation and are patriotic in our writings. But I think there are very, very few poets that delve into the art of poetry like you do. So I can imagine knowing what you know and being interested in the type of poets that you're interested in. It's going to be very, is it difficult for you to pick up a contemporary poet and read all the, it's like any poem you see now is going to be jargon. Like, this is mainstream poetry. I don't want to read this one. I don't, give me something better. You know, is there, how do you feel about today's poetry?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most interesting periods in Nigerian poetry. There are many brilliant poets. Like I yesterday or day before yesterday, I read this poet. I can't remember his name. Is it Chisom or Kafo or something like that? Very brilliant poem in a journal. There are many poets doing amazing things, and there's also this danger because someone, I think 2 days ago, I read a post by someone who said literary journals have a lot of power because they have the ability to publish this type of poem, and then everyone will be subjected to writing that type of poem. That thing exists. And I think even when I was writing, I saw a lot of that. There's this idea, there's this inclination to pander to what the American journals desire. So, poets, contemporary poets want to publish in journals and all that and all that and all that. There's one thing I told myself, that I am going to remain faithful and I'm going to maintain my integrity as a poet. I'm going to remain faithful to what I believe. I'm not going to pander to um, what the gatekeepers are asking for or what they require. I've submitted my works to a lot of journals. I received rejection. I didn't care. I said I was going to be faithful to what I believe in. So I believe there is this thing that is happening now. Some journals have um, uh, prescriptions on how poetry should be written, and unfortunately, many people who want to get published in those journals, and they are great journals, tend to write in that sort of way. I told myself that I was going to remain faithful to my style, to whatever I feel, to my approach, and I'm not going to pander, and I'm not going to be distracted. I'm not going to be swayed, you know, to write in order to please anyone.
I think
And
that's what makes you unique and your work.
yes,
So we have
yeah,
only 10 minutes more. I think I got this one.
10 minutes,
There
and
were
I'm
a
enjoying
ton
this
of
discussion.
yeah, I think we've all been enjoying it. Alhamdulillah. So there were a ton of questions, but here I think I got about two. But I'm going to ask you them before other people ask your questions. So the first one was, who is your favorite Nigerian poet? Tell us about five favorites of your Nigerian poet.
5 favorite Nigerian poets.
Yes,
5.
five.
Ah, that's unfair. There are so many beautiful poets in Nigeria. A lot of them, I think you should just allow me to mention one poet that I greatly
Okay,
admire.
mention one. Okay,
Christopher Okibo. Christopher Okibo.
Christopher Okibo. Okay. And
But
why
there
is
are
he your
many,
favorite
many.
poet?
I don't know. I started reading Okibo from the time I left secondary school. You know, I read Okibo. I read. I think I read an interpretation of his poem by Donatus Uwoga. You know, and
Mm-hmm.
I read Labyrinth and Parts of Thunder. And for me, Okibo remains an astonishing poet that everyone should read.
Your Nigerian Adonis.
My Nigeria Adonis. There are so many
No.
beautiful poets writing in Nigeria, a lot of them, you know, a lot of beautiful poets. But I want to say that Tade Ipadiola is exceptional. Tade Ipadiola. I love his The Sahara Testament. And it was very instructive to me, particularly when I was writing The Poet of Dust,
Okay.
because he wrote about the Sahara and all that and all that. So I needed to read that book for me to be able to write The Poet of Dust. Yes.
Okay, so closing remarks. I don't see any more questions, and apologies for not writing down all the questions. It was difficult dividing my attention between listening to you and trying to write down the questions. So we're going to rectify that in the next chat.
There is a
I am
question
trying
by
to.
Paul Liam. Paul Liam asked a question. I don't know
Okay,
if you can see it. He said something like a
I
follow-on
cannot see.
question on why he likes Okibo. So I don't know if you can give Paul Liam an opportunity to ask his question.
Yes, of course, you should. He should. Pauline, please go ahead and send in your question.
And I think
One
Sweetie
question
also
after Pauline.
wants to ask
Yes, please
a
send in the
question.
questions. Just send in the question. Your poetry and quantum physics. Okay, this is about Karo. He's talking about your poetry and quantum physics being related. Wow.
Please, let's ask Karufi that question. He should answer it.
Okay, we're going
Karufi
to
is a
hold you to
mystic.
that next time. Karo, answer your
Yes.
question by yourself. We're waiting for those who have questions to please send in their questions. Our time is about to be up, unfortunately. In the meantime,
I can see Sweetie. Okay,
in the
go ahead,
meantime,
please.
can you tell us something? What do you have to say about the whole writing, the process, learning new forms of poetry? What do you have to say about it? And what do you have to say to young writers that are upcoming? Okay, sorry, let me not interrupt you. Is there a way you can write outside the current mystic way you shroud your work? Wow.
For instance, now I want to write a poem. I want to write a book of poetry. I already have a title. I had this title long time ago, like about 2 years ago. I said the title of my next collection is The Judgment Hole of Osiris. It came to me like in a dream, the Judgment Hole of Osiris. Now, I don't know what those poems are going to be about. I don't know what to write about. I don't have a topic. Like butterflies, I concentrated to a great extent. Not all the poems were about surrealist paintings, but most of them. In The Poet of Dust, it was about issues about a traveler's journey, you know, towards towards uncovering or towards experiencing the transcendental. But for this next book, I don't know what to write about. I said, okay, let me write about normal things, about, you know, pedestrian poems, about normal life and stuff. I still don't know what to write about. I have the title in my head. That's going to be the title of the next book. I don't know what to write about. I don't know. Maybe I should just stop talking about it, and I don't know. I just don't know.
You said you are not a poet, you are an enchanting babalao. Okay, we have just 4 minutes more. I don't want to take up your time. I'll go to the shrine. He's already in his shrine. He's doing his work in his shrine. He's sprinkling dust of
Oh,
voodoo
Sweden
on
said
our
that,
head.
right?
Yes,
Enchanting Babalawo.
I think we
Meanwhile,
have a new name
Sweden,
for you.
by next week, Sweden is going to get $200,000 for us. I hope he's going to give you $20,000 from there.
Okay, thank you so much, Umar. This has been. Actually, let's even agree with CD too. Okay, you have officially gone from poet of dust to enchanting Babalawo.
Babalawo.
I think if she gets her $100 next week, she will come back for more.
Yeah, and coincidentally, this morning I just watched this movie by Kule Afolayan Adekunle, who has the power to bring and to raise people from
Ah,
the dead. So
it is not a
I'm
coincidence.
Adekunle Babalawo.
It was not a coincidence. So,
I
Umar,
think I think
thank
Siba wants to ask a question or Karufi. I don't know.
oh, they're all agreeing with her that you're an enchanting Babalawo. So don't maybe you
Okay.
promise them $100. I don't know.
No, Sweden is going to give
As
us
for me,
hundred
my
thousand
own.
dollars.
No, for no, since you promised them me my own. After the book chat, I will come to you.
And,
I'll come
and
and
you
be
know,
your
I was with
express.
Sweden last week, and I begged him that please, they are going to announce the NLNG prize winner for the literature prize this year on the 14th of October. I begged Sweden that please, it's strictly by invitation. The special guest of honor is Osinbajo, is Obasanjo, not Osinbajo. You need someone to
Okay.
carry your bag. I am willing to carry your bag. Please help me beg Sweden. He should invite me so that I'll book my flight. I'm in Port Harcourt. I'll fly to Lagos. I'll carry that his bag. So that when he gets the money, we can carry it for
You
him
can
and
share
share.
it.
Yes. I promise him I don't want the money. I just want to carry the bag. Let me have the privilege of let me beg him, please. It's just
Okay,
next
I'll
week.
help you begging. Don't
Strictly by
worry.
invitation. I want
Please,
to attend the
please, we're
dinner.
begging you. Allow him to attend. You have to allow. Maybe if you allow him, you allow me to come and shine his shoe for the event. Me too. I'll have chance to enter. Last question.
Yes, I
Ali
think
Lawan said
Sudi has a question. Can you see it?
there is one before her
Sudi,
that I wanted to ask you. This one said, I noticed you don't call yourself a poet. In an interview, you referred to yourself as someone who engages with poetry. How and why so?
yeah, and Sudi also said something like, "Is there a way you can write outside the current mystic way you shroud
Yes,
your
yes,
work?"
yes.
Yes, I think when I started writing seriously when I was in the Defense Academy, and I was calling myself a poet. And for me, being a poet was being into, it was like gaining access into this exclusive club of intellectuals. So it was a thing of pride. I'm a poet and all that. And we had senior
It was
cadets.
an elite title.
Yes, it was elitist kind of. I had senior cadets who loved poetry. Some of them would call me like, "Wow, so you were a poet? Okay, can you write a poem about my girlfriend? Blah blah blah. Write about a bed, this that." It was very difficult for me to write those poems, and I would say, "Yes, sir, I will try. I'll write a poem." But they were
I
my
hope they didn't
friends.
make you.
I didn't hear that.
I said I
I
hope
didn't
they
get
didn't
that.
make you do 20 push-ups for not doing it or for not doing it the way they wanted.
No, 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 no. They're very nice. They encouraged me to write and all that. But I couldn't write those poems. I said I would try, but you know, I couldn't meet up. So much later in life, I I don't know. I now felt because I came across younger poets who were saying like I'm a poet, and then this title, poet, means someone who has arrived, someone who has attained, you know, uh, intellectual accomplishment. And I now felt that no, I don't think I'm a poet because I don't think I have attained intellectual accomplishment. I'm very influenced by the pre-Islamic Arab poets, and of course those Arabic poets of the Abbasid era, the Al-Mutanabi, the An-Nefari, Abu Nuwas, and all of that. And I know in Arabic, I first write the first poems I wrote were from the Ajami tradition, which was, of course, influenced by the Islamic and Arabic poetry tradition. And so poetry comes from, in Arabic, it comes from the word poetry is shi'r, and shi'r comes from the root word, which means knowledge. So for you to be a poet, you have to be someone who knows or someone who is seeking knowledge. So for me to be a poet, I'm on a path seeking knowledge. I am not knowledgeable. I am not a poet. I'm someone who is striving to know. That is, most of my poetry is actually meta poetry. I love meta poetry. I love meta fiction. I also write prose. I have a novel that has just been accepted by a publisher. Maybe next time you host me, we'll be talking about the novel, that kind of thing. I'm someone who believes that, I am trying to know. I'm by profession, I'm in the military, but my specialization is flying, is piloting, and one of my old instructors, um, not Roberto, I'm trying to remember his name, Bonantini. He told me, he said something like, look, Umar, the next time you feel you know everything about flying, then you should stop flying. He said, anytime you feel you know everything about flying, then you are a danger, you are a risk, you should stop flying. He's an Italian, he speaks English with an Italian accent. So I feel every intellectual in my quest to engage with poetry, with literature, humility is required, because there were so many greats that were there before us, and so I try to inquire, I try to engage with poetry. I do not specifically see myself a poet. The day I see myself a poet means that day I have attained poethood. That day I'll stop writing poems.
We hope you will never be a poet. Because we cannot afford to live in a world where you're still alive and you're not writing for us. So we hope you will never be a poet.
Wow.
Okay, we're 4 minutes past our time. Umar, it's been an honor. It's been lovely. It's been very enlightening chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate. You have been a great companion. I cannot express how much I have enjoyed this discussion. I cannot express how much I want to thank Poetic Wednesdays, Nasiba Babale, Karufi, Salim, the great Salim, for enabling this. You have been so amazing. But please, before you go, let me beg Sweetie now that I have my bag ready. I'm ready to fly to Lagos on the 14th of October.
Just do your babalawo kudu on her. Don't worry.
Let me beg Sweetie. And
Sweetie, please take Umar Sidi with you. Please and please, we're begging you. He's not a babalawo. He's going to be a very, very good companion too. Please.
And I also have to warn you, there are harsh critics. Recently, I think about 3 days ago, Paul Liam posted something on Facebook. It was my autograph of his book. I can't even remember that I did that. That's this book, like Butterflies. And I said, for Paul Liam, harsh critic, may poets strangle you. And he posted it on Facebook, and I was like, he hopes poets will not strangle him. For me, that was very amazing, and I like it. And I cannot even remember that I wrote that stuff. Paul is a wonderful human being. He's my good friend, and I treasure him. I like him. I love what he does, because Paul has the ability to spark conversation about literary works. And for me, there is nothing greater than that. You know, for me, my approach is that when I write, whatever you write, it no longer belongs to you, and whatever you publish, it no longer belongs to you. Which is why there are poems. When I write, I feel, oh, I want to keep these poems to myself. But the moment I agree that these poems will go to the public, or this piece of writing will go to the public, then I feel nothing about it. Like when I did my presentation, someone asked me, because there were so many people in attendance, it was successful in by judgment of many, in Port Harcourt. I'm working in Port Harcourt, so I said, well, let me do it where I'm working. So many people were in attendance, a lot of people, people in the literary world and all that and all that. And they asked me, how did you feel? And I felt nothing. I didn't feel anything. I was neither excited. I was I didn't have any either positive or negative emotion. It was just me. Because I have come to an understanding that when you put out a literary work there, you should detach yourself from it. It's no longer you. Now, this belongs to the public. The public can decide to critique, and you should not allow the criticism of the public to get with you, to get to you. And I think that has been my stance. So, um, Paul Liam is a great critic, which we have to celebrate and accept and encourage for him to continue to keep the conversation ongoing about literary works in Nigeria. Paul
Pauliam, I'm
Liam,
helping
thank
you celebrate. You should sleep with a big smile on your face today because Umar Sidi just gave you a shout out in this book chat. Thank you for what you do. Please keep on doing it and keep on doing it great. Thank you for having us. Sidi, please, I'm begging you, please take Umar Sidi to the NLNG. Please, I am begging you. Please, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us this night. Have a wonderful night.
Unfortunately, you didn't allow me to read a poem.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, please. And God, I forgot my closing line. My closing line was to be if you want to learn how to write a short surrealist poem, it is in the book. I have forgotten. That was supposed to be my closing line. Please read us a poem, and then we'll close with
Okay,
that.
I want you to tell me which is your favorite poem. Which poem should I read?
American Girl, the very last
Oh,
poem.
I don't know why people tell me. The last time I had a conversation with Nasiba, it was amazing. It was beautiful. It felt very, very deeply personal. I have a recording of that conversation. I still go back to it. And she asked me to read American Girl. I don't know why. I don't know why you chose American Girl.
Honestly,
Can you tell us?
I just love the poem.
Wow. Is there any specifics?
Yes, from where is it? Each door leads to a cabinet of marvel. Can you start from there, please?
Okay. Well, American Girl is a sweet, but if I were to choose a poem to read, I would choose I Can't Be Present.
You mentioned it being one of your favorite poems.
Yes. And that poem was dedicated to my friend, my teacher. I call him teacher of the mysteries, Usman Umar Akil. In fact, I dedicated the whole of this book to him. He's a wing commander in the Nigerian Air Force. He's my friend, my classmate. We went to the Nigerian military school together. In fact, we've been together all along. When I woke up and I looked right, I saw Usman Akil. When I went for interview for Air Force Military School, Jos, he was there with his skull cap. Then we went to Zaria. I saw Usman with his skull cap. And I walked up to him and said, Usman, I said, hello, are you not the one I saw in Jos? He said, yes, we became friends. Next time I will see us is we were in military school as classmates. We're in the same class, till we passed out. When we passed out from the Nigerian military school, Zaria, of course, it was a secondary school. We went to the Nigerian Defense Academy. We're in the same battalion, Poma Battalion. And we have been
So
friends
fate
and
brought you guys
companions.
together.
Yes, Usman taught me how to read because there's something they call dodging in NMS. Like you run away from, from the boys' lines and go and hide. So Usman was always hiding, but when he hides, he reads. So I follow him to hide, and when we're hiding, we're reading. He taught me how to read. And so I'm very grateful to Usman, and he's a great intellectual. Usman is something else. I call him my teacher. In fact, in this book, in the dedication, I let me see what I wrote. I said, for Usman Umar Akil, master of the mysteries, teacher,
Teacher,
brother,
brother,
and friend.
friend.
He's always
Wow.
teaching me stuff. If you noticed, I mentioned some philosophers in this book, like Martin Heidegger, Ludwig Wittgenstein. All those things were taught to me by Usman. Because Usman will read Heidegger and said, look, have you read Heidegger? Heidegger said, before Wittgenstein said this. And Usman knows everything from the Western scientists to the great, Islamic philosophers, the great Islamic philosophers that contributed to the conversation during the Abbasid era and even during the Andalusian era. So I remain grateful to Usman for all that he has done for me. So I'm going to read American Girl as he suggested.
Okay.
I thought I should start from each door leads to a cabinet of melancholy. Each door leads to a
Okay.
cabinet of melancholy. You stand against the wall. The moon's rays are swallowed by the multicolored beam of a candle. You are locked in the arms of melancholy as you the last page of the gospel of separation. Melancholy ingests a strand of your hair. He collects another strand and turns it into a butterfly. Now that you are locked in a convent where mermaids are forced to shed their scales and forget the mystery of water, will you remember your hair flows in my blood? Will you remember your scales are the bed cover upon which every night, with the moon reading me and the birds cackle as my background orchestra, I fly to mermaidhood to master how to outline your curves and contours into poems made with the unbreakable solidity of a gemstone? American Girl, will you remember the prayer of a mermaid? Will you remember your scales? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for reminding me that you haven't read a
Thank
poem. I will treasure this moment for the rest of my life. Thank you very, very much, Umar. This has been amazing as well as enlightening.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you, Mariam. You've been an astonishing host. And you've been an
pleasure.
astonishing host. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you. Thank you. I wish this conversation would not end. Unfortunately, it has to. Thank you, thank you.
Don't worry.
Thank you and God
For
bless.
your next
Bye-bye.
exhibition, I'll be there, inshallah.
Thank you. I appreciate so much. I appreciate. God bless you.
Thank you, and you too. Bye.